Hello, today is Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. This is the Bitfarms daily broadcast. At least that's what we're calling this on a temporary basis, just given the fact we're so focused on Bitfarms, which, if I'm not mistaken, closed up again today, over $3 a share to I think about $3.05 a share. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, last night, or I guess you could say late yesterday afternoon, Ben Gagnon, CEO of Bitfarms, very generously sat down with a group of individuals, great guys, on X to answer questions and to engage really with the community at large. Ben, thank you so much for doing that, and thank you to the gentleman who hosted this event. I think this was a really great thing. So we definitely got some additional details, which I think is really useful for the purposes of really trying to figure out what the next steps are. So I'm going to try to put a link in the description to today's broadcast to that Spaces conversation. It ran for a little bit over an hour. Hey, listen, if you're telling me, hey, I don't want to listen to a 1 hour Spaces with the CEO of the company I'm invested in, listen, if you've got, 10,000, 100,000, $1 million or more in shares of Bitfarms, you're going to want to listen to this, because at the end of the day, hey, this is like straight from the proverbial horse's mouth, right? As the saying goes. So that, check that out. I'm just going to highlight a couple of quick things that I thought were really intriguing. So it turns out that Bitfarms was interested in acquiring Stronghold Digital Mining from before Stronghold was even a public company. That's really, I think, some interesting little color there as to what was going on. As you may recall, Greg, during the announcement of the acquisition, mentioned, hey, this has been like 3 years in the making, or words to that effect. And I thought to myself, 3 years in the making? Wow, that's an interesting statement. And lo and behold, it is indeed something that Ben confirmed in the call yesterday. So, the Stronghold assets, are, hey, even back then, there was a recognition that what Stronghold Digital Mining possessed had value. And, the public markets never really recognized that. I'm deeply grateful that Bitfarms ultimately did follow through with its acquisition of the entire company. And so I thought I'd share that for any of y'all who are, OG Stronghold Digital Mining shareholders, right? Hey, so it is true. Bitfarms was interested in Stronghold pretty much from day one. Now, the really big elephant in the room, something that's concerned me, not because I have a problem with Panther Creek or Scrubgrass or the environmental work that's being done at both those sites. I have no problem whatsoever with that. But I was a little bit uncertain as to whether or not, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons, right, the Metas, are these companies that want to be in bed with a company, so to speak, in bed with a company who's circulating fluidized bed system for essentially incinerating mine waste, could potentially have some headlines that are not maybe in keeping with the whole, zero carbon, low carbon, renewable type of phraseology that we see in a lot of news releases. And so, Ben addressed that straight on. And again, thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time to do so. So prior to the Stronghold Digital Mining acquisition, Bitfarms actually proactively, if I'm understanding Ben correctly, went out to potential HPC AI partners and said, hey, this is what we have in mind. These are the sites. Hey, how do you feel about potentially, I guess, co-locating an HPC AI, data center, hey, at one of these sites in so many words? And Ben acknowledged that, yeah, hey, some of these entities, he didn't mention which ones, expressed a little bit of reluctance, but that others said, hey, what we are focusing on, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, what we're really focused on is time to energization. We want to make sure that we can plug these GPUs for which we have a sunk cost, right? We just spent $1 bazillion, right, buying all this stuff, or, getting into contracts, basically stipulating that we are going to buy all these GPUs. We want a path to, having an energized place to plug this stuff in as soon as possible. Again, I'm paraphrasing, I guess, hey, we can overlook, or at least, hey, maybe even appreciate the environmental, remediation work being done at these sites. So we're okay with that. Now, even more, I think, interesting and important is that the first phase 1 50 megawatt ESA, or I guess like Energy Services Agreement, that is in place for Panther Creek, it basically is set up in a way that whoever, if you know, the customer is, let's say there's one customer, it's only, quote unquote, only 50 megawatts. That's a huge amount of megawatts. Okay. No matter what, you know, you read about, 200 megawatt deals or gigawatt deals, whatever. 50 megawatts is a very, very respectable amount of energy. So the issue is, hey, the individual, well, not individual, but a company, right, that chooses to have their equipment, say at Panther Creek, similar to other deals such as like TerraWolf's Lake Mariner site, right? Hey, basically Panther Creek or Bitfarms will just pass along the electric bill, so to speak. It's kind of up to the customer to figure out, hey, what kind of price lock they want to try to get in the market, right? PJM's a pretty big market. There's a lot of different mechanisms and tools, right, through which a company can try to lock in some pricing, right, for the energy that they're going to basically be getting at Panther Creek. But the point is, this is the key point. It sounds like because there is a bit of uncertainty regarding some stipulations by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I'm sorry, I'm messing up the acronym for FERC, and I apologize. Sometimes this happens when you're kind of like live on camera like this. There's an issue there that's essentially going to prevent, at least for now, Panther Creek, if I understood correctly, from providing direct electricity to the HPC AI data center. That's kind of a really big deal because remember, as it existed during Stronghold's time owning the Panther Creek asset, hey, Panther Creek itself, the mine waste energy facility, was providing electricity directly to the Bitcoin data center. To the extent Panther Creek, the power plant, had to go down for maintenance or there was some issue, then the backup source of electricity would be the PJM grid. In this instance, if I'm understanding the architecture that Ben is describing, you would basically have the grid serving as the primary source of electricity for the HPC AI data center at Panther Creek. Now, it's as of yet unclear whether or not the FERC situation is going to potentially prevent Panther Creek from being the backup source of electricity to that HPC AI data center, which it would be completely able to do given the fact that it's only, again, 50 megawatts, which again is a tremendous amount. It's my understanding that the Bitcoin data center that exists at Panther Creek right now is about, let's call it roughly 60 to maybe 65 megawatts. So again, the HPC AI data center wouldn't have any issue at all being potentially, powered by Panther Creek on a backup basis. But whether or not that's going to be allowable or whether or not that gets into that murky territory of, hey, maybe some companies are okay having their presence at Panther Creek if the energy is coming from the PJM grid, but they're maybe a little bit more leery about getting directly energized by a mine waste to energy facility. But that still leaves open the question of like, well, what kind of backup power might a customer insist upon? Now you might say, hey, but who needs backup power? I'm a risk taker. Maybe, hey, I want to have an HPC AI data center and say, hey, I'm comfortable just going with PJM. I only need one source of power. What I'm noticing in the marketplace, though, is that there seems to be more of an emphasis on wanting a backup source of electricity. So at Lake Mariner, for example, that's a site owned by TerraWolf, a company I've spoken about very admiringly on these broadcasts. Hey, they have two how shall I phrase this? They have two connections from the grid, but the pathways that both those connections have are different. So if one pathway goes down, the other pathway stays up. Now, the alternative would be to have, and this is sort of like the de facto standard in some ways, is like a diesel generator, or, well, multiple diesel generators potentially, right, depending on the size of the data center. And that would serve as a backup source of electricity. At the Colossus data center in, I think, Memphis, Tennessee, what XAI or Grok, right, Elon Musk, what they've essentially elected to do is to have Tesla mega packs, which is like a battery solution, serve as the backup source of power. But for a while there, they were using, I guess, some sort of other alternative backup system, and it wasn't optimal, or at least they felt they didn't want to really use it anymore. I don't know if it was like methane based or if there was, I don't know, there was something about it that was just not palatable. And so, focusing again on Panther Creek, hey, the goal is we're going to try to make money at Panther Creek with an HPC AI data center as quickly as possible. Ben emphasized that in so many words. Again, I'm paraphrasing a bit. He emphasized that a lot, right? That the goal is to really try to, put some, stack some cash on the table, so to speak, in terms of a return on investment, in terms of making money from an HPC AI data center strategy, right? Scrubgrass is not forgotten. That has the potential to be, if I understood Ben correctly, kind of like a potential one gigawatt project all by itself. That's many, many years down the road, it seems. So obviously, right, hey, the goal is, you're doing this strategic pivot. Hey, Wall Street is patient. Investors can be patient, but it's like at some point you want to be able to show some revenue that's coming from this strategic pivot. And so I think that's why we're seeing such a focus on Panther Creek. And that's, hey, right, that's like really the first project that's up at bat, so to speak, to really see if we can hit a bit of a grand slam with this thing. Now, hey, is there something else that I heard on this Spaces call that really kind of piqued my interest? Yes. Now, a couple of companies were mentioned, ExxonMobil and BP, like British Petroleum, or Beyond Petroleum, as they like to call themselves, right, with a little sunflower logo, even though it's like 90%, 95% still petroleum. Okay. These are companies, and again, I'm paraphrasing what Ben said, but these are companies that have an interest in using like HPC AI type computational models without necessarily having to want to run like a data center themselves. So the potential exists for Bitfarms, which is really trying to position itself as primarily an infrastructure company, meaning we're not going to really be on the hamster wheel of like, oh, these GPUs, just like Bitcoin mining machines, let's go raise $1 bazillion. Let's dilute the stock right through an ATM or whatever else. Hey, let's go buy a bunch of the latest, greatest machines, only to have them rapidly depreciate within about a year or two to the point where you have to go back out into the market, buy them again, and the cycle just continues, right? The proverbial hamster wheel. Ben appears to be incredibly focused and committed to not having Bitfarms do that anymore. That is also true as it relates to the HPC AI side of the business. However, there is some thinking that, hey, for some of the smaller sites that Bitfarms has, like, 20 megawatts, give or take a little bit, like in that range, hey, maybe the thinking is, why not actually build out the data center ourselves? Meaning move a little bit higher up the stack, right? Where you're not just kind of providing an energized shell, right? But you're actually going ahead and getting a data center up and running that can essentially be a turnkey solution for an ExxonMobil or a BP or I believe Disney was mentioned, right? Like, hey, we want to do some animation work. Now, would Bitfarms by themselves potentially do this? Would they partner with a so-called neo cloud company to collaborate with them to do something like that? I guess time will tell. But and I think that's a really, really fascinating and useful bit of information, because what it means is that Bitfarms has the potential to largely be an infrastructure company, but in certain sites that wouldn't necessarily be as interesting to potential customers who maybe want massive data centers of their own. Hey, we could have these little bespoke, specialized data centers that are, again, a bit higher up the stack where we're providing everything. It's like a turnkey solution. Hey, you want to crunch some numbers, generate data, go through and try to recognize some patterns. Hey, you can go ahead and do so on our system, and we have a dedicated, like subdivision to do that. And again, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Okay, bottom line. For Bitfarms to ultimately succeed and to reach its absolute full potential as a company, and to have the Stronghold digital mining assets, which many of us believed in relentlessly, fanatically, right, for so long, to have all of these things reach their full potential, you know what we really need more so than a stock price that keeps going up, although I'm not going to complain about that. What we're going to need is the news release wherein Bitfarms announces a deal, right, with a potential partner in the neocloud space, maybe a potential end user, right, for some of the data center capacity that's being talked about. Essentially, we're at a point now where yes, it's exciting to see civil works being done eventually, and it's going to be exciting to see the data center itself getting built. But you know what's going to be even more exciting? To find out that we actually have a customer. Because I don't care how many other companies out there say, hey, yeah, we're open-minded to doing business with you. Yeah, we think it's cool. You guys are awesome. That's great. Hey, when push comes to shove and you're putting a contract in front of them for $5 billion or whatever the number is going to be, that's the moment of truth. And that's what we really need to have happen to see this stock absolutely go bonkers, even more so than it has done already. And that might be a bit of a process, and it may take a while. Okay, my friend, let's stay positive, let's be great, and we'll see each other again really, really soon.